Hi everyone, here to talk about our next phylum. This is phylum Echinodermata. So now we are entering the world of deuterostomes. We'll talk about deuterostomy again in a little bit and remind you about the differences from protostomes. But so far, we've talked all about protostomes, and this is going to be our first phylum of deuterostomes. So phylum Echinodermata is going to be sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, and brittle stars. And hopefully you saw some of these on your virtual field trip of Half Moon Bay. So when you go out to the tide pools someday, you'll be able to see usually some sea stars floating around there. And then if you get deeper, you can usually see things like sea urchins and sea cucumbers. So let's talk about this phylum a little bit. So there's about 7,000 species of echinoderms. They're triploblastic, just like the rest of the animals we've been talking about recently. They have organs, and they have secondarily radial symmetry, which means that the ancestor of this group was bilaterally symmetrical, but that these organisms now exhibit radial symmetry. But remember, our last phylum we saw that had radial symmetry was cnidarians, right? And so it's not that the common ancestor of those things had radial symmetry and that's why echinoderms have it. It's that they evolved radial symmetry after they had evolved bilateral symmetry, okay? The coelom is completely lined in mesoderm. There's no segmentation in these organisms. And they're heterotrophic. So we've got lots of different feeding strategies here. So some are parasitic, some are predators, some are scavengers and grazers. They can reproduce sexually or asexually, depending on the species. And there's no head. So there's no head in these organisms, which you probably know when you think about it. And one of the major things that holds everything in this group together is something called the water vascular system. We'll talk about this in a little bit and how this works. Okay. The second major trait that defines Echinodermata is going to be calcium carbonate spines, plates, and or spicules. Okay, so we've got some stuff externally that's going to be made of calcium carbonate. We'll talk about that. It's going to be in the skin as well. Okay, so here we are, right? So far in the class, we're almost at the end of our animal diversity section. So we started off talking about porifera, cnidaria, and then we got into this whole group of Lophotrochozoa, which is that RNA-based group, including things like annelids and mollusks. And then Ecdysozoa, which is going to be the things that molt. So this is going to be tardigrades and arthropods and nematodes. And so far, everything here has all been a protostome. Okay? So now our new phylum Echinodermata, is up here in Deuterostomia. And after we talk about Echinodermata, we'll get into the hemichordates and chordates. So it's going to be our last couple of phyla here. Okay, so Echinodermata are deuterostomes. And what does that mean? Reminder that that means that they, during embryonic development, that they are forming the anus first, right? So it depends on, it's a difference in how the gastrulation happens in that early embryo. Okay, so that's deuterostomes. Adults have pentaradial symmetry, and so their body parts are going to be arranged in fives or multiples of five. So this is a sunflower star here, 20 legs. Lots of sea stars and brittle stars are going to have 5 legs. So those body parts are going to have multiples of 5 or 5. Whereas the larvae are bilaterally symmetrical. So that early larval stage is bilateral symmetry, indicating that in the evolutionary development that we had this bilateral symmetry. Okay. And this phylum is entirely marine and benthic, so they live in the ocean, live on the bottom of the ocean. Okay, so remember, everything up until now has been protostomy, which is this, right? Where you have gastrulation and that blastopore, which is going to form the digestive tract of your organism, form the gut. That early blastopore becomes the mouth. In deuterostomes, it's going to be Echinodermata and chordata, which is going to include everything, including us. The blastopore becomes the anus. Okay, so it's just a different way in which development happens. And one of the interesting things I think about the fact that chordates like us and echinoderms share this deuterostomy is that for a long time, sea urchins have been a really great model for early embryonic development of deuterostomes. So we've learned a lot about human embryonic development, vertebrate embryonic development, chordate embryonic development by looking at sea urchin embryos because the deuterostomy and this cleavage pattern early on is similar. Okay. All right. So there's 5 classes of living echinoderms. We've got Asteroidea, Holothuridia, Echinoidea, Euphoroidea, and Crinoidea. And generally, this whole phylum shares a couple of things. The whole phylum has this calcium carbonate endoskeleton, and this is spines or plates in the skin. So this is what's kind of funny is that it's not an exoskeleton because it's not outside the skin like an arthropod, but it's not an internal bony skeleton like we have. But instead, the endoskeleton is underneath the skin or in the skin. The adults have pentaradial symmetry, larvae bilateral. They have this water vascular system, complete digestive tract, and we have a hemal system now, so something to carry oxygen that's derived from the coelomic cavity. And the nervous system is going to be a nerve net, ring, and radial nerves. And this is going to be because we don't have a head, right? There's no place to put a brain in these organisms. So we're going to have systems of ganglia and nerve net. Okay, so here's what this calcium carbonate endoskeleton looks like. This is going to be the endoskeleton of a sea urchin. So when the sea urchin dies and all the living tissue rots out here, this is called a test. So you might find these on the beach sometime. And this is that calcium carbonate endoskeleton that would be covered on the outside by skin, on the inside by living tissue as well. So different species might have plates or spines, okay, in their skin, but essentially it's this crunchy exterior. So if you ever held a sea star, maybe when things open back up again, you can go to Monterey Bay Aquarium in the touch tanks or go tide pooling in Half Moon Bay and feel how crunchy some of these organisms are. But the crunchiness, that calcium carbonate, is not exterior like an arthropod. It's actually interior inside the skin. Okay, so it's an endoskeleton. All right, here's showing you the adults, the pentaradial symmetry. So it's radial in 5 directions, whether they have 5 legs or 20. The larva has bilateral symmetry. And now let's talk about this water vascular system. So this is going to be found only in echinoderms and in all echinoderms. And really, it says it's a vascular system, so it is going to transport some things within there, but so much of it's for movement, okay? So how this works is that in the sea star, for an example, is that you have this ring canal in the middle here, and then running up each arm, you have a radial canal, and off of that radial canal are these little tube feet, okay? And the tube feet, we can watch a video in a little bit of a sea star moving, but the tube feet are what's actually going to move on the bottom of the sea star and let it kind of crawl along the surface, okay? So how water gets into that system is through something called the madreporite. So it's a big hole, right? Madreporite that is bringing water into here and creating that water pressure that can move these tube feet like this. Okay, and each tube foot is a little tiny suction cup. So there's going to be thousands of suction cups on the bottom of your sea star. Okay, so here's an example of a sea star. Asteroidea is the class for sea stars. Okay, on the aboral surface. So this is what's kind of funny about these, because they have no head, right? There's not going to be an anterior and a posterior. There's not going to be a dorsal and a ventral, really. It's going to be something called aboral surface and oral surface. So the aboral surface is sort of the back, the top part. The oral surface is underneath where they're actually going to be eating from, okay? And so externally, they have this aboral surface on top, where they're going to have the madreporite and the spines, and then something called pedicelaria. So any kind of projections from the top are going to be up here on this aboral surface. Whereas the oral surface, the one that's touching the ground where they're crawling, is going to have the tube feet that help them move, and something called the ambulacral groove, which is going to be the opening to the radial nerve and the mouth up in here too. Okay. All right. If you were going to dissect a sea star, what you would see is that the digestive system, you get a mouth actually on the bottom, okay, on the surface where they're going to be eating, and then the anus is on top. Okay, so here we are at the bottom of the sea star. Food's going to come in the mouth. There's going to be a stomach there in the middle portion here. Okay. And then there's pyloric ceca that extend into each arm. So essentially there's going to be some digestion taking place in each arm and diffusion of those nutrients into the tissues surrounding it. Okay. And then stuff's going to come out the anus here. So waste is going to come out the top of your sea star here at the anus, which is really actually hard to see. So in addition to in the arms of your sea star, in addition to there being uh, these pyloric ceca that are going to give nutrients to all the different arms, you're going to have gonads in each arm. So actually, when you cut open a sea star, the majority of the organism is going to be gonad. Yeah. Okay. So sea stars are generally dioecious and have external fertilization. So they're going to spew out eggs and sperm into the environment. And that release is going to be timed to environmental conditions. So there's seasonal breeders, meaning that you're only going to see um, uh, eggs and sperm at certain times of the year. Okay, I'm going to take a break there and post this video, and then I will come back with the end of this video talking about the rest of the classes of echinoderms.